Director panics without translator, until the fired cleaner appears in the room speaking 9 languages. Richard Johnson was running through the company hallways like he'd never run in his 58 years of life. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he checked his watch once more. It was 2:45 in the afternoon, and the official translator had simply vanished. He stopped in front of the packed conference room and felt his heart race. Representatives from 9 different countries were already seated, waiting for the meeting that would determine the future of the construction firm Johnson and Associates. Without proper communication, all was lost. "Mr. Johnson, where is the translator?" the German representative asked nervously in broken English. Richard swallowed hard. How could he explain that Marcus, the translator hired specifically for this meeting, had disappeared without a trace? The young man's phone had been out of service for over 2 hours. He's on his way," Richard lied, trying to mask the desperation in his voice. The meeting was crucial. After months of negotiations, investors from France, Germany, China, Japan, Italy, Spain, the United Kingdom, South Korea, and Canada had gathered to finalize their stake in the company's biggest project, the construction of a sustainable housing complex in Chicago. The contract was worth $200 million and would secure jobs for over 500 employees for the next 5 years. Richard glanced at the door again, hoping for a miracle. Then he heard hesitant footsteps in the hallway. He turned and could hardly believe his eyes. Emily Davis was walking toward the room, wearing a simple grey blouse and faded jeans. Her brown hair was tied back in a casual ponytail, and she carried an old synthetic leather folder. It was the same young woman he had unfairly fired the week before. "What are you doing here?" Richard whispered, trying not to draw the investors' attention. Emily stopped in front of him, and Richard could see the determination in her brown eyes despite her obvious shyness. "Mr. Johnson, I came to return some documents I found on my desk," she said quietly, showing the folder. "And I heard you were having trouble with the meeting's translation." Richard felt a mix of anger and desperation. How did this girl, who just a week ago had been cleaning the offices, know about the company's problems? "Emily, you shouldn't be here. Security—" "I can help," she interrupted, lifting her chin with a courage Richard had never noticed before. "I speak French, German, Mandarin, Japanese, Italian, Spanish, English, Korean, and a little Arabic." Richard stared at her as if she had just claimed she could fly. "Are you joking with me? This isn't the time for—" "Mr. Johnson." Emily took a deep breath. "I know you have no reason to trust me after what happened, but those people in there have been waiting for over an hour. I can hear their conversations from the hallway. The Chinese representative is already impatient, and the French woman is questioning the company's professionalism." Richard felt the ground slip from under him. How did Emily know this? And more importantly, did she really speak all those languages? "How do I know you're not lying?" he asked, desperation overtaking his pride. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, Emily walked to the conference room door and discreetly listened to the conversations. Then she returned to Richard. "Mr. Lambert is telling his assistant that if the meeting doesn't start in 10 minutes, he's leaving. Mr. Schmidt is complaining that he missed an important meeting in Boston to be here. And Mr. Zhang is commenting to his personal interpreter that American companies are disorganized." She translated it in perfect English. Richard was stunned, not just by the translations, but by the accuracy of the information. Those were exactly the concerns he imagined the investors would have. "Emily," he said, his voice choked, "you were fired. Why are you offering to help me?" The young woman lowered her eyes for a moment, and Richard saw deep sadness cross her face. "Because I know there are 500 families depending on this project's success, and because I believe everyone deserves a second chance." Richard felt a tightness in his chest. The second chance. That was exactly what he had denied Emily a week ago when he believed the false accusations from Christine, his secretary. "Emily, if you can really pull this off, I don't know how I'll ever thank you." "You don't need to thank me, Mr. Johnson. You just need to let me into that room." Richard hesitated. What if Emily failed? What if this was just the desperation of a fired young woman trying to blackmail the company? But then he looked at the room full of increasingly impatient investors and made the riskiest decision of his career. Fine, but if this goes wrong, it won't, Emily said, with a confidence that surprised them both. Richard opened the conference room door, and all eyes turned to him. The tension in the air was palpable. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. Our interpreter had an emergency, but fortunately our international advisor has arrived to assist us. The murmurs started immediately. Richard saw the German representative's frown and the skeptical expression of the French delegate. Emily walked into the room with steady steps, despite her trembling hands. She positioned herself beside the main table, and to everyone's surprise began to speak. Bonjour, Monsieur Lambert. Je m'excuse pour le retard. Nous allons commencer immédiatement, she said in fluent French, giving a small, respectful bow. The French representative raised his eyebrows, clearly surprised by the perfect pronunciation. Emily turned to the German. Herr Schmidt, vielen Dank für Ihre Geduld. Wir wissen Ihre Zeit sehr zu schätzen. Then to the Chinese delegate, Zhang Xiansheng, 非常感谢您的耐心等待。我们现在就开始会议. And so on, greeting each representative in their native language with a fluency that left the room in complete silence. Richard was astonished. Not only did Emily speak the languages, but she knew the cultural etiquette of each country, the bows, the formal greetings. Everything was perfect. How does she know all this? Whispered Christine, the secretary, who had appeared at the door. Richard didn't even answer. He was too busy watching Emily organize the documents with impressive efficiency. She seemed like a completely different person from the timid cleaner he knew. The meeting began with Richard presenting the project. Emily translated simultaneously, switching between languages with a fluidity that mesmerized everyone. But it was during the first technical question that something extraordinary happened. The Italian representative asked a complex question about the project's sustainability specifications. Richard started to answer, but Emily gently interrupted. Excuse me, Mr. Johnson. I believe there was a slight misunderstanding in Mr. Ferrero's question. She addressed the Italian in his language. Signor Ferrero, il signor Johnson ha menzionato sistemi di energia solare, ma credo che la sua domanda si riferisse specificamente all'integrazione con sistemi di energia eolica, giusto? The Italian nodded vigorously, impressed by the precision of her correction. Esatto, molto bene. Richard looked at Emily with a mix of admiration and confusion. How had she caught the nuance of the question that even he hadn't understood? Emily translated for Richard. Mr. Johnson, Mr. Ferrero wants to know specifically about integrating solar panels with small wind turbines on building rooftops. Richard breathed a sigh of relief. This was an area he knew inside out. As the meeting progressed, it became increasingly clear that Emily wasn't just an exceptional translator. She was actively improving communication, clearing up misunderstandings, and even suggesting technical solutions when she noticed gaps in responses. During a coffee break, the South Korean representative approached Emily. Young lady, where did you study Korean? Your pronunciation is impressive. Emily smiled shyly. Thank you, Mr. Lee. I learned from Mr. Park, an elderly man I cared for over 2 years. He taught me while I helped him with his physical therapy exercises. The Korean man looked visibly moved. You cared for the elderly. That's noble work. Richard, who had stepped closer to listen, felt something stir in his chest. Caring for the elderly. Emily had learned Korean by caring for an old man. How many other stories did she have to tell? Christine watched from a distance, her expression growing more troubled. Richard noticed her unease and remembered the accusations that had led to Emily's dismissal. Important documents allegedly stolen. But seeing Emily now demonstrating such integrity and knowledge, the accusations seemed more absurd by the minute. The meeting resumed, and during the cost presentation, something unexpected happened. Christine, trying to show efficiency, brought Emily a coffee, but in a move that seemed deliberate, she bumped into her and spilled the hot liquid all over the documents Emily was using for translation. "Oh, what a shame," Christine exclaimed with feigned concern. "Your papers are all soaked." Emily looked at the drenched documents, then at Christine. For a moment, Richard saw a flash of understanding in the young woman's eyes, as if she knew it hadn't been an accident. The investors began murmuring, uneasy about the disruption. "Don't worry," Emily said calmly, standing up. "I can continue without the documents." "How so?" asked the French representative. Emily smiled. "I have a good memory." And then, to everyone's astonishment, she proceeded to translate the entire presentation from memory, including specific numbers, percentages, and complex technical specifications. Her accuracy was so precise that Richard checked his own documents to confirm she was correct. And she was. Every single detail. During a longer break, the Japanese representative approached Emily with curiosity. "Do you have a photographic memory?" Emily blushed slightly. "Maybe a little above average." "More than a little," Richard murmured, still processing what he'd witnessed. Then the German representative made a remark that completely shifted the meeting. "Wait a minute. I know you. Weren't you part of Harvard University's exchange program 3 years ago?" Emily looked visibly surprised. Yes, I was. But it was just a summer course." "Just a summer course?" Mr. Schmidt laughed. "You were the top student in your class. Your urban sustainability project was presented at the international conference. How did you end up—" He stopped, glancing at her simple clothes and then at Richard. An awkward silence filled the room. Richard felt all eyes turned to him, questioning. Emily worked in our maintenance team," Richard stammered. "Maintenance?" the French representative interjected. "A young woman with that level of education working in maintenance?" Emily took a deep breath. "I can explain. After the exchange, I couldn't secure a scholarship to continue my studies. My grandmother got sick, and I needed to work to pay for her treatment. Mr. Johnson gave me a chance when no one else would." The explanation, spoken simply and with dignity, had a profound impact on the room. Richard saw the admiration in the investors' eyes, but also noticed their silent judgment about the company's practices. "And why aren't you working here anymore?" asked the South Korean representative. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily looked at Richard as if asking for permission to respond. "There was a misunderstanding," Richard said quickly, "but it's been cleared up." Christine, who had grown increasingly pale during the conversation, shifted nervously in her chair. At that moment, the door to the room slowly opened, and a grey-haired woman, leaning on a cane, stepped in timidly. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I'm looking for my granddaughter, Emily. The receptionist said she was here." Emily stood up immediately, clearly worried. "Grandma Ruth, what are you doing here? My dear, you left in such a hurry today that you didn't even have breakfast. I brought your vitamins," the elderly woman said, holding up a small bottle. The scene deeply moved everyone present. A concerned grandmother who had left home just to bring vitamins to her granddaughter. "Grandma, you shouldn't have come all the way here. What about your knee?" "It's fine, dear. But I got worried when you said you had something important to settle. Ever since you lost your job, I get nervous when you leave like that." Richard felt the weight of the situation hit him like a hammer. Mrs. Davis, clearly a woman of limited means, had risked coming here out of concern for Emily. "Sorry for interrupting," Mrs. Davis said, finally noticing the many people in the room. "I didn't know there was a meeting." "It's no interruption at all," said the French representative, standing up. "You're very welcome. I'm Marie Lambert." Mrs. Davis smiled shyly and shook the offered hand. "Ruth Davis, nice to meet you. Your granddaughter is extraordinary, Mrs. Davis. She saved our meeting today." "Saved?" Mrs. Davis looked confused at Emily. "It's a long story, Grandma. I'll explain later. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing—" "No, please," interrupted the Japanese representative. "We'd like to hear, if it's not too much trouble." Richard was torn between embarrassment and curiosity about where this situation would lead. Mrs. Davis settled into a chair offered by the German representative and accepted a glass of water. "Well," the elderly woman began, "Emily has always been special. Ever since she was little, she had a knack for languages that amazed everyone. When she came to live with me, I was worried about how I'd raise her alone. Richard noticed Mrs. Davis had avoided talking about Emily's parents and guessed there must be a painful story there. But she was always very determined, Mrs. Davis continued. She started working early to help me with expenses, and whenever she could, she studied. She got used books, watched videos at the public library. How did she learn so many languages? Asked the South Korean. Mrs. Davis smiled proudly. At the hospital where I went for physical therapy, she met many elderly people from different countries. Americans who had returned from abroad, foreigners who had moved here. Emily started talking to them to ease their loneliness, and without realizing it, she picked up their languages. She did this voluntarily? Asked the Italian. Yes, every weekend. She translated medical documents, helped during consultations. The doctors started calling her to assist with other patients. She never charged a thing. Richard felt a lump in his throat. While he saw Emily only as a cleaner, she was dedicating her free time to helping those in need. And how did she manage to participate in the exchange program in Germany? Asked Mr. Schmidt. Oh, that was a struggle, Grandma Ruth sighed. Emily had won a partial scholarship, but she needed money for travel and lodging. She worked double shifts for a year. I sold some things I had saved up, but it was worth it. She came back radiant, full of ideas. And then? Encouraged the Frenchwoman. Then she tried to get another scholarship to continue her studies, but Grandma Ruth looked at Emily, who nodded encouragingly. I had a serious heart problem. I needed expensive surgery. Emily gave up everything to take care of me. The room fell completely silent. Richard saw tears in some of the investors' eyes. She could have put me in a public hospital and continued her studies, Grandma Ruth went on. But no. She said I was more important than any degree. She got this job here and, well, we were doing fine until last week. What happened last week? Asked the German representative. Richard felt all eyes turn to him again. This time there was no escaping the truth. There was a baseless accusation, he said, his voice growing quieter. What kind of accusation? Pressed the Japanese man. Richard looked at Christine, who was visibly terrified. Then he looked at Emily, who met his gaze with an expression of understanding and forgiveness that made him feel even worse. Emily was accused of stealing important company documents. The shock in the room was immediate. That's impossible, said Mr. Schmidt. I know this young woman's character. The accusations were false, Richard admitted. We found out after she had already been fired. How did you find out? Asked the Korean woman. Richard took a deep breath. It was time to tell the whole truth. The documents weren't stolen. They had been mistakenly thrown away, and Emily found them and was trying to return them to the right department when she was seen handling them. And who made this accusation? The question came from the Italian woman, her tone suggesting she already suspected the answer. Richard looked at Christine, who was trembling. It was my secretary. All eyes turned to Christine, who finally couldn't take the pressure. I can explain, she stammered, standing up. I saw Emily handling Mr. Johnson's documents and I thought it was suspicious. A cleaner messing with important papers. But didn't you investigate before making the accusation? Asked the Frenchwoman with clear disapproval. I was trying to protect the company. Emily stood up calmly. Christine, can I ask why you spilled coffee on my documents earlier? The direct question made Christine even more nervous. It was an accident. Like the documents you said I stole were also an accident? Emily asked, her tone still calm but firm. Grandma Ruth watched everything carefully, and Richard realized the elderly woman understood the situation perfectly. Christine, Richard said, feeling he had to step in, I think you'd better explain everything. Christine looked around the room, saw there was no way out, and finally broke down. Fine. I lied, okay? I knew Emily hadn't stolen anything, but she was just a cleaner and always meddling in things that weren't her business. Always knowing everything, always helping everyone. The staff liked her more than me. The confession hit the room like a bomb. You ruined this young woman's life out of jealousy, asked the German man, outraged. It wasn't like that, Christine cried. She had no degree, no formal education. How could she know more than me? I've worked here for 10 years. Richard felt deep shame. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted Christine's words without investigating properly? Emily approached Christine and, to everyone's surprise, placed a hand on the secretary's shoulder. Christine, I understand your concern, but I never meant to take your place. I only wanted to help when I could. You're not angry with me? Christine asked, sobbing. I'm hurt, Emily admitted, but anger won't solve anything. If you were worried about me interfering with your work, you should have talked to me directly. Emily's response left everyone impressed, especially Grandma Ruth, who smiled proudly at her granddaughter. Richard stood up, sensing it was his turn to take responsibility. Emily, I owe you an apology, a sincere one. I should have looked into things more carefully before making any decisions. You didn't deserve what happened. Mr. Johnson, Emily replied, you gave me an opportunity when I needed it most. That's something I'll never forget. But now I want to do more than just apologize, Richard continued. I'd like to offer you the position of International Relations Coordinator, with a competitive salary and all the support you need to finish your studies. The silence in the room was broken by the investors' applause. That's a very kind gesture, said the French representative. But I must say, after what we witnessed today, our company would also like to invite Emily to work with us. And ours as well, added the German. Actually, the Japanese representative interjected, I'd like to propose something different. What if several of our companies joined forces to sponsor Emily's education? She could earn a degree in international business and then work as a consultant for all of us. The suggestion sparked excited murmurs around the room. Emily was visibly moved, but looked to Grandma Ruth before responding. It's a wonderful offer, she said. But first I need to know, would my grandmother be well taken care of during that time because she's my priority? The question made Grandma Ruth even more emotional. My dear, you've already cared for me more than I deserve. It's time for you to think about your future. Grandma, my future will always include you. The exchange between the two deeply moved everyone present. I have an idea, said the South Korean representative. What if the company provided full healthcare coverage for your grandmother, along with an assistant to help her when needed? That way, Emily could study with peace of mind. That's more than generous, Richard said, and of course, the company would contribute as well. Emily looked around the room, visibly fighting back tears. I don't know what to say. A week ago I was unemployed and now you're being recognized for your true worth, Grandma Ruth said, standing up to embrace her granddaughter. As the details of the proposal were discussed, Richard approached Christine, who remained seated, head bowed. Christine, you've worked here for 10 years. That's a decade of dedication I can't ignore, but what you did was serious. Christine nodded without looking up. I'm transferring you to another department where you can start fresh, and I want you to take a course in human relations. You need to understand that a person's worth isn't just about the degrees they hold. Mr. Johnson, Christine finally met his eyes. I know I don't deserve it, but thank you for giving me a second chance. Richard glanced at Emily, who had forgiven a far greater injustice, and realized that second chances was something everyone deserved. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. The meeting resumed with a completely different atmosphere. The investors, impressed not only with Emily's skills, but also with the human values they had witnessed, unanimously approved the project. But we have one condition, said the French representative. We want Emily to be our local representative throughout the entire development of the project. And we'd like her to oversee the sustainability aspect, added the German. It would also be valuable to have her guidance on the technological side, said the Japanese representative. Richard realized Emily was becoming indispensable, not just to his company, but to the entire international consortium. Emily, he said, it looks like you'll have to multiply your time by 9. Emily laughed, the first time Richard had seen her truly relaxed. Well, I've always liked challenges. During the signing of the initial contracts, Grandma Ruth pulled Richard aside. Mr. Johnson, may I say something? Of course, Grandma Ruth. Emily never told me the details of what happened here last week, She only said it was a misunderstanding. But I know my granddaughter. She was in a lot of pain. Richard felt the weight of guilt again. Grandma Ruth, I made a terrible mistake. If I could take it back. Mr. Johnson, the elderly woman interrupted, my granddaughter taught me something. There's no use dwelling on the past if you can build a better future, and that's what you're doing now. You're not angry with me, Grandma Ruth smiled. Mr. Johnson, I've lived a long time. I've seen good people do bad things out of fear, pressure, or misunderstandings. What matters is the ability to admit mistakes and try to make things right. You're doing that. The simple wisdom of the older woman moved Richard deeply. Grandma Ruth, I'd like to do something more. Emily mentioned you needed an expensive surgery. If there's any remaining debt... Mr. Johnson, Grandma Ruth raised her hand, that's not necessary. Emily already took care of it. She sold some jewelry she inherited from her mother to pay for my treatment. I tried to stop her, but she said jewelry doesn't heal anyone. Only people caring for people can do that. Richard was deeply moved. Emily had sacrificed her last mementos of her mother to care for her grandmother. Then at least let me ensure you have the best medical care from now on. It's part of Emily's new contract. Grandma Ruth nodded in agreement, and Richard saw tears of gratitude in her eyes. The afternoon continued with technical discussions about the project, but Emily remained the center of attention. She didn't just translate, she offered valuable suggestions that revealed her deep understanding of sustainable construction. During a break, the Chinese representative approached her. Emily, where did you learn about construction techniques? Working here, she replied simply. When you clean offices, you end up reading a lot, and I've always been curious. You read technical reports while cleaning? During breaks or when I finished early, Mr. Johnson always left documents on his desk, and I love learning. Richard realized that, without knowing it, he had been Emily's teacher all these months. She had absorbed knowledge from the documents he left scattered, becoming an informal expert. Emily, he said, you've always had access to confidential company information, yet you never misused it. That shows exceptional character. Mr. Johnson, trust is the foundation of any relationship, professional or personal. If I misused what I saw, I'd be betraying not just you, but myself. The maturity of her response impressed everyone present. As the day went on, it became clear that Emily wasn't just a talented young woman, she was a natural leader. She mediated discussions between representatives from different countries, found common ground, and proposed creative solutions to emerging conflicts. How did you learn to handle people from different cultures so well? Asked the Italian woman. By taking care of my grandmother in the hospital, Emily replied. There, you meet all kinds of people going through the hardest moments of their lives. You learn to be empathetic, to listen before speaking, to understand that behind every behavior lies a story. Richard watched Emily with growing admiration. How had he been so blind to her true potential? During the final project presentation, Emily did something that surprised everyone. She asked to speak directly to the investors. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, alternating between English and other languages as she spoke, you're not just investing in a construction project, you're investing in hope. She paused, looking at each face in the room. This project will employ 500 families directly and hundreds more indirectly. These are mothers and fathers who will be able to put food on the table, children who will be able to study, grandparents who will have dignity in their old age. Richard saw that Emily was speaking from the heart, and everyone in the room was completely captivated. But beyond that, she continued, you're showing that it's possible to do business with soul, that it's possible to profit ethically, that it's possible to build bridges between countries and cultures based on mutual respect. Emily's words resonated deeply in the room. Richard noticed some investors visibly moved. I'm just a young woman from rural Illinois who was lucky to meet good people along the way, she said, glancing at Grandma Ruth and then at Richard. But I believe that when we reach out to someone, we're building a better world, and that's what you're doing today. The silence that followed was broken by spontaneous applause. Even Richard was clapping, moved by Emily's eloquence and sincerity. Emily, said the French representative, you should consider a career in diplomacy. Actually, the German interjected, we'd like to make a formal proposal. Our company would like to sponsor your education in international relations at the best university of your choice. And our company would like to offer a paid internship during your studies, added the Japanese woman. We could arrange a cultural exchange, said the Korean. Richard realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Emily wasn't just landing a job, she was gaining an international professional family. I'm speechless, Emily said, visibly emotional. My granddaughter, Grandma Ruth stood up. Accept all the offers. You deserve every one of them. The elderly woman addressed the investors. Ladies and gentlemen, you're not just hiring a professional. You're gaining a daughter who will care for your projects as she cares for me. The simplicity and love in Grandma Ruth's words touched everyone deeply. Richard stood to give the closing remarks, but first turned to Emily. Emily, before we finish, I need to say something publicly. You've taught me a lesson I'll carry for the rest of my life. He turned to the room. For years, I thought a person's value was in the diploma on the wall, the position they held, the clothes they wore. Emily showed me that true worth lies in character, dedication, and the ability to care for others. Richard paused, visibly emotional. I almost lost the best employee I've ever had because of my prejudices. If not for this meeting, if not for the desperate need for a translator, I would never have discovered who Emily truly is. He looked directly at Emily. You could have left me hanging today. You could have humiliated me after what I did to you, but you didn't. That says a lot about who you are. Emily stepped closer to Richard. Mr. Johnson, you gave me an opportunity when I needed it most. That was already more than I ever expected from life. And today you gave me so much more than a job. You gave me the chance to fulfill dreams I didn't even know I could have. The two embraced, and Richard felt he was holding not just an employee, but the daughter he never had. The final contract signing was a celebratory affair. Emily would simultaneously serve as International Relations Coordinator at Johnson & Associates and as a consultant for the International Consortium, with all her studies fully sponsored. But the biggest surprise came at the end of the meeting. Emily, said the French representative, our company has a special proposal. We'd like you to spend 3 months in each of our countries, learning our business cultures and work methods. Does that mean traveling abroad? Emily asked, incredulous. France, Germany, Japan, South Korea, China, Italy, the United Kingdom and Canada. All expenses paid, of course. Emily glanced at Grandma Ruth, worried. Grandma, that's so many months away. My dear, Grandma Ruth smiled, at 75 I've already lived a long life. Now I want to see you live yours. Besides, we have the internet these days, don't we? You can call me every day. Actually, Richard interjected, I'd like to make an offer. Grandma Ruth, would you help me look after Emily while she studies? You could come to the office a few times a week, offer advice on human relations to the staff. The elderly woman was surprised. Me, but I don't have any education. You have something better than formal education. You have life wisdom. And after today, I've realized my company needs to learn about human values. Grandma Ruth looked at Emily, who nodded encouragingly. Well, if you think I can help, you can, and so much more, said the Korean representative. Wisdom isn't learned in school. The meeting ended with everyone exchanging contacts and making plans for the coming months. Emily would be hired immediately, start her studies next semester, and travel internationally during academic breaks. When all the investors had left, Richard remained in the room with Emily, Grandma Ruth, and Christine. Christine, he said, I want you to know that despite what happened, I still believe you can be a great professional, but you need to learn to work with the team, not against it. Christine nodded, ashamed. Emily, she said hesitantly, Can I apologize again? I know I don't deserve it, but... Emily stepped closer. Christine, we all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them. If you want, we can work together to make sure this never happens to anyone again. You really forgive me. I forgive you. But more importantly, you need to forgive yourself and try to be a better person. Richard watched the scene with admiration. Emily was only 22, but she displayed an emotional maturity many seasoned executives lacked. "Grandma Ruth," he said, "you raised an exceptional young woman." "Mr. Johnson," the elderly woman replied, "Emily raised herself. I just gave love and support. The rest she achieved through effort and determination." "And with so much of your love too," Emily added, hugging her grandmother. 3 months later, Richard was in his office when he received a call from Emily, who was in New York. "Mr. Johnson, how are things there?" "Everything's great, Emily. Grandma Ruth is right here with me, organizing the HR department better than any expert I've ever hired." "Oh, that's wonderful. And how's the project coming along?" 3 months ahead of schedule. It seems having a competent international coordinator makes a difference. Richard heard Emily's laughter on the other end of the line. "Mr. Johnson, I have news. The European representatives were so impressed with the American project that they want to replicate it in other countries. We might be looking at an international expansion for the company." Richard nearly dropped the phone. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. They want you to come to New York next week to discuss the details." "Emily, this is incredible. How did you manage this?" "Remember what Grandma always says, you reap what you sow. I just showed them what I learned working with you. That good business is when everyone wins." Richard felt his eyes well up. In just a few months, Emily had transformed not only his life but the company's future. "Emily, I need to ask you something. Don't you feel any anger toward me? Not even a little, after all you went through?" There was a pause on the other end. "Mr. Johnson, if you hadn't fired me, I would never have shown up at that meeting. If I hadn't been at the meeting, none of this would have happened. Sometimes the bad things that happen to us are just the universe preparing us for something good." Richard smiled. At 58, he was learning about life from a 22-year-old. "Emily, when you come back, I have a proposal for you." "What proposal?" "How about becoming a partner in the firm? You deserve much more than just a salary." The silence on the other end was long. "Mr. Johnson, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to answer now. Think it over. Talk to Mrs. Davis." "Okay, but Mr. Johnson." "Yes?" "Thank you for everything, for giving me a chance at the beginning, for admitting your mistake, for giving me a second chance. You changed my life. Emily, you're the one who changed mine. You taught me that true success isn't just what you build, but how many people you help grow with you." When Richard hung up, Mrs. Davis was smiling at him. "Mr. Johnson, can I say something?" "Of course, Mrs. Davis. You're becoming the man Emily always saw in you, even when you couldn't see it yourself." Richard was moved by the depth of her observation. "Mrs. Davis, how does Emily see the good in people even after being hurt?" "Mr. Johnson, my granddaughter learned early that holding on to bitterness is like carrying rocks in your backpack. It only makes the journey heavier. Better to let go and move forward." The elderly woman's simple wisdom never failed to impress Richard. A year later, Emily returned to the United States with an MBA in international relations and perfect fluency in 12 languages. The firm, Johnson & Associates, had become Johnson, Davis & Associates, with Emily as a minority partner. The original project had been completed with total success, employing over 700 people directly. But more importantly, it had created an ethical business model being replicated in 15 countries. Emily had become a reference in sustainability and social inclusion, invited to speak at universities and international conferences. But to Richard, the greatest success was seeing Emily at the firm every day, arriving early to chat with the cleaning staff, remembering everyone's birthdays, mediating conflicts with wisdom, and always putting people first. Christine had become one of the company's best employees, running the internal training program that identified talent in every department, regardless of position. Grandma Ruth, at 76 years old, had become the official human relations consultant, visiting the company 3 times a week and being adored by all the employees, who affectionately called her Grandma Ruth. At the 1-year anniversary celebration of the new partnership, Richard gave a speech that would stay in the memory of everyone present. "Exactly 1 year and 3 months ago, I was in this room desperate because my translator had disappeared. I thought I was facing the biggest crisis of my career. He looked at Emily, who stood beside him with Grandma Ruth. In reality, I was facing the greatest blessing of my life, because it was this crisis that showed me who truly matters, that taught me a person's worth isn't in what they appear to be, but in who they really are. Richard paused, visibly emotional. Emily, you didn't just save a meeting. You saved a company, saved hundreds of jobs, and most importantly, you saved the soul of a man who was losing himself in his own prejudices. He turned to all the employees present. Today, our firm is internationally recognized, not just for the quality of our projects, but for the human values we uphold. We have employees from 12 different countries, inclusion programs that are global models, and above all, we are certain that every person who works here is valued for who they are, not for how they appear. The audience was visibly moved. But the most important thing, Richard continued, is that we've learned true success isn't about what you accumulate, but what you share. It's not what you build alone, but what you build with others. Emily stood up to speak. Mr. Johnson, when I walked into that room a year ago, I just wanted to help. I never imagined I was stepping into my new family. She looked around at everyone present. You've taught me that it doesn't matter where you were born, what school you went to, or what clothes you wear. What matters is the willingness to learn, to grow, and to help others grow too. Emily paused, looking especially at Christine, who sat in the front row. We've also learned that everyone deserves a second chance, that we all have something valuable to offer, and that when we work together with respect and understanding, we can achieve extraordinary things. The celebration went on late into the night with employees from different countries conversing in multiple languages, yet all united by something stronger than any cultural barrier: mutual respect and genuine affection. Richard watched from a corner next to Grandma Ruth. Grandma Ruth, I have a confession to make. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson. When I was a child, my mother always said the most important people in our lives arrive when we least expect them, in ways we'd never imagine. I never understood that until I met Emily. Grandma Ruth smiled. Your mother was wise, Mr. Johnson, and Emily didn't come into your life by chance. She arrived at the exact moment when you both needed each other. How so? You needed to learn to look beyond appearances, and Emily needed to learn that her worth would be recognized by good people. You healed each other. Richard reflected on the elderly woman's words and realized she was right. He and Emily had saved each other that day in the conference room. 2 years later, Emily had just returned from a trip to China when she received an urgent call from Richard. Emily, I need to tell you something important. What happened, Mr. Johnson? Is Grandma okay? Grandma Ruth is doing great. In fact, she's the one who gave me the idea for what I'm about to propose. What proposal? Emily, our company has grown so much that we need a permanent international branch, and I'd like you to lead this expansion. Emily was silent for a moment. Mr. Johnson, does that mean... It means you would be the International Executive Director of Johnson Davis and Associates, based in New York, coordinating projects in 15 countries, with a multicultural team and a budget of $500 million. Emily nearly dropped the phone. Mr. Johnson, this is more than I ever dreamed of. Emily, 3 years ago you were an unfairly treated cleaner. Today you're the most qualified professional I know to lead this expansion. You deserve this opportunity. What about Grandma? Would she agree to move to France? Richard laughed. Emily, Grandma Ruth has been studying French for 6 months. She said she's always wanted to see the Statue of Liberty. Emily couldn't hold back her tears. Mr. Johnson, how can I ever thank you for everything you've done for me? Emily, you already have. Every day, with your work, your dedication, your example. You've turned our company into something far beyond just business. You've made it a family. 3 months later, Richard was at Chicago's airport saying goodbye to Emily and Grandma Ruth, who were leaving for New York to begin their new adventure. Mr. Johnson, Emily said, hugging him, promise you'll come visit me. I promise. And I also promise to keep applying everything you've taught me here in the United States. Grandma Ruth stepped closer to Richard. Mr. Johnson, take good care of the boys here. And remember, a good company is one where people feel at home. I'll remember, Grandma Ruth, and thank you for lending me your granddaughter all these years." "Mr. Johnson," the elderly woman smiled, "I didn't lend her. I shared her. Emily now has two families, ours and yours." Richard hugged the two women who had completely changed his life. 5 years later, Richard was in his office when his secretary announced a special visitor. "Mr. Johnson, there's someone here who wants to speak with you. Said it's about a job opportunity." Richard looked up from his documents. "Send them in." To his surprise, a young man of humble appearance walked in, wearing simple clothes and holding an old folder. Richard was immediately reminded of Emily years ago. "How can I help you?" Richard asked, standing to greet the young man. "Mr. Johnson, my name is Jason. I work as a cleaner in the building across the street. I heard your company values people who want to learn." Richard smiled. "That's true. Tell me about yourself, Jason." "Well, Mr. Johnson, I study engineering at night and work during the day to support myself. While cleaning, I end up seeing a lot of projects and documents, and I have some ideas that might help." Richard felt his heart race. History was repeating itself, but this time he knew exactly what to do. "Jason, what kind of ideas?" The young man opened his old folder and showed some hand-drawn sketches. "Ideas about sustainable construction using recycled materials. I developed these techniques by studying the waste I see being discarded by offices." Richard examined the drawings and was impressed by the creativity and feasibility of the proposals. "Jason, have you ever thought about working for a construction company?" "I dream of it, Mr. Johnson, but without a degree yet." Richard interrupted him with a smile. "Jason, let me make you an offer. How about starting as a technical assistant while you finish your studies? Our company values potential, not just degrees." The young man was speechless. You're serious?" "Completely serious." "And Jason?" "Yes, Mr. Johnson?" "Welcome to the family." As Jason left the office beaming with his new opportunity, Richard picked up the phone and called Emily in New York. "Emily, you won't believe what just happened." "Tell me, Mr. Johnson." Richard recounted his meeting with Jason. "Emily, it's as if life is giving me the chance to do from the start what I should have done with you." "Mr. Johnson," Emily said, visibly moved, "this shows you've truly learned, and I'm certain Jason will surprise you just as much as I did." "Emily, I want to thank you once again." "For what, Mr. Johnson?" "For teaching me that every person who crosses our path could be an angel in disguise. For showing me that true success is giving others the chance to shine." "Mr. Johnson, you gave me my first opportunity. Now you're giving Jason the same chance. That's what we call a virtuous cycle." Richard hung up the phone with a heart full of gratitude. He looked out his office window and saw the building where Jason worked. How many other hidden talents were there? How many other Emilys were just waiting for an opportunity? He picked up a sheet of paper and began drafting a project. Talent Identification and Development Program for Outsourced Companies. If Emily had taught him anything, it was that human potential was everywhere. You just had to know how to see it. That afternoon, Richard spoke with Jason about his life story. He learned the young man supported his sick mother and two younger siblings, studied with books borrowed from the library, and dreamed of building sustainable, affordable housing. "Jason, have you ever thought about studying abroad?" "Mr. Johnson, that would be impossible for someone like me." "Jason, let me tell you the story of a young woman who also thought certain things were impossible." And Richard recounted Emily's entire journey, from her unfair dismissal to becoming the company's international director. "You mean, that could be possible for me too. Jason, if you work as hard as Emily did, if you keep the humility and eagerness to learn that she always had, there's no limit to how far you can go." Jason's eyes shone with a hope Richard recognized immediately. It was the same light he'd seen in Emily's eyes years ago. End of story. Now tell me, dear listener, what did you think of this story of perseverance and second chances? Do you believe Richard truly learned his lesson, or does he still have more growing to do? And Emily, do you think she made the right choice in forgiving so easily? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever faced a similar situation in your own life. I'd love to read each and every one of your comments. Don't forget to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories that will touch your soul.